Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of A Soul Grows in Israel. Today, we are diving deep into the intersection of spirituality, growth, and ancient wisdom with our very special guest, Rabbi Adam Yitzchak, the creator of the Mindset Alignment. Rabbi Adam has combined his extensive knowledge of Kabbalah, Torah teaching, and modern psychology to create a powerful framework for personal transformation. Rabbi Adam has helped individuals confront their mental blocks, deal with their inner selves, and realign their lives in accordance to their potential. In this episode, we're going to explore the whole path of spiritual principles and the way he integrates it into his work, and how ancient wisdom, particularly from Kabbalah, can lead to a deeper, more fulfilling life. Whether you're familiar with these types of topics or new to these teachings, you'll walk away with some insights, I hope, to transform your mind and soul just a little bit. So let's get into it. A Soul Grows in Israel, a podcast where we ask the questions about ancient Jewish wisdom, modern life, and everything in between. So let's ask, let's have fun, and let's grow together. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of A Soul Grows in Israel. Today, I am so happy to have our special guest, Rabbi Adam Yitzchak, who I found just by scrolling on Instagram and finding his posts inspirational and filled with light. Rabbi Adam, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I've got, hey, I got so many questions, but before we sort of like jump into all the deep stuff, can you sort of tell us your journey that got you here today to where you are in Israel with a beard, learning Kabbalah, happily married? How did we get here?
Yeah, it was a beautiful, long journey, and I feel like it's just starting still. My parents are from the former USSR,
Wow.
so I grew up with a strong connection to my Jewish identity, though I wasn't given much in terms of the ritual practice for good reason. They didn't have much growing up themselves, being
Mm-hmm.
in Soviet Russia. So I was like a very spiritually in tune kid that gave me kind of new age notions. They said, "You're an indigo child," things I didn't understand, but I took it as part of, okay, there's something different here. But people came to me naturally seeking advice and counsel as early 8, 9 years old. I always had that narrative of people feeling safe in my space. So when I was around 12 and a half, my father asked me, "How's your bar mitzvah prep going?" And I said, "Going great. I don't want it. I'm not Jewish. There's no God." And in his great wisdom, he says to me, "Good for you."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Keep asking questions." So the fact that you're asking questions means you're already way ahead of people who are just born with a silver spoon, indoctrinated into the system, and never ask a question. So this is the essence of the Jewish people, is to ask. Just do me a favor, identify with your Judaism. You could be an atheist Jew, even Einstein was. Just keep asking. That's all I ask of you. So I kept asking. So I had this atheist phase, an agnostic phase. I was in the New Age community for 5 years, static dance parties, yoga events, chakras, new moon, anything and everything under the sun, while learning some Kabbalah, albeit a watered down version,
Yeah.
because my father had been learning it since I was 6. So it was in the house, even being in a secular home. So kind of going through the ups and downs and all arounds. There's a lot of intricate stories in the midst there of my late teens, early adulthood. A really powerful story, which is a podcast in itself. I dodged a Class X felony at some point. Could have went upwards of 30 years, but nothing's on my record.
Part two, guys, don't worry. We won't keep you in suspense. We'll get to it one day.
One day, God willing.
Mm-hmm.
And at the particular switch for me was dating a non-Jewish girl at the time. I felt very seriously about it. I'm not sure exactly how she felt, but it was a very up, down, and all around kind of toxic, chaotic relationship. And it inspired me to call out in literal tshuva. I cried 2, 3 hours a day
Mm.
for 2 weeks straight, golf ball sized tears. And I said, "I'm ready. I don't know what, I don't know how, I don't know where. Just show me the way. Open the door for me." And within a month, full ride to yeshiva, Or Sameach here in Jerusalem, dropped everything on a 10-day notice, the whole 9 yards. So
Mm.
got nice apartment, 3 meals a day, getting to learn 10 hours a day, a most explicit answer to my prayer. Show me the way, just give it to me. I'm ready.
Wow.
So I was there for 2 years. And every free moment I had, I was trying to learn Kabbalah because learning Talmud 10 hours a day as a spiritual soul is pretty hard.
Mm.
But I gritted through it, had my stint, so to speak. And then I came to Telstone, where I joined my Ashlag community. It's a Chassidut here, a small community with Rabbi Gottlieb. And I was learning in Kollel, also about 10 hours a day, plus or minus. A lot of service to my Rebbe, was part social media manager, part coffee maker, part driver, along with the learning. And my wife, at some point during the end of that Kollel experience, was working 3 jobs with our newborn at home. Well, I'm in the heavens, right? I get to just learn all day and have a great time. But she saw my potential. She knew who I
Wow.
could become, and I need to learn. So she supported that. But she said, "Enough is enough. Good. We got there. It's time for you to step it up." So I did. Stepped it up, and again, just got into my prayer and asked for that clarity. And within, I want to say, also like 2 weeks, I found myself literally taking a coaching program. I just kind of fell into my lap. And here I am 2 years later with a coaching company,
Wow.
helping primarily CEOs, founders, some interesting people as well, former UFC champion and Grammy Award-winning music producer, and cool people like that. So still on the up and up there. Learning a little bit less these days,
Yeah.
but still try to keep up my 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock Zohar, keeping it up.
So, like, it's one thing to learn in theory, and I always think learning to teach is a whole different level, even though it might feel a little less monk-like, or maybe a little less, I find, l'shem shemayim. And then all of a sudden I realize I get to learn to teach, and this is practical. And this is what brings me to my next question. And I wonder if you could identify with this, and I have a feeling you do. But people who are a bit more spiritually bent do have a harder time with the structure, like you mentioned, Gemara or halacha or boundaries. And this is something through years on this earth, I've learned that this sort of like din world of boundaries has actually kept me safe. And I wonder if that's ever been a struggle for you.
Definitely been a struggle for me. I
Mm.
think my whole life. So much so in my father's wisdom, he said to me throughout my years, and he was famous in our family, so to speak, for lecturing me for 3, 4 hours at a time if I wasn't on my behavior or best behavior, so to speak. And in the midst of those lectures, I heard a narrative of you either need to become religious
Mm.
or join the army.
Discipline.
Because you have, yeah, he just said you just got discipline, but he went to the extremes because it's
Hmm.
like you've got none of it. So like here's
Yeah.
the other extreme so you can balance out.
Hmm. 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 It's a really
So
important
certainly,
tikkun. Yeah, it really, really is. Because too much of anything, and I find that also the match that God gives you, your other half or your soulmate, is quite often sort of the yin to your yang, and maybe they'll be more grounded. And you describe your wife having 3 jobs, which to me is like the modern day Rachel, wife of Rabbi Akiva, in its own iteration. Would you say she's more grounded?
that's why I married her in large part, among many other reasons of how amazing she is.
Yeah.
But the shadchan who set us up said, "You seem like a real spiritual guy."
Hmm.
I wouldn't say that's like head in the clouds, but you're up there.
Yeah.
I see you. She's like pretty practical. I think you guys would be very complementary. That's
Yes.
why he set us up.
Genius.
100%.
100%.
Yes.
And, guys, if you're listening out there and you're wondering why your spouse is so different than you and that creates friction, that's exactly the magic dust that might make everything work out. So I think that's like a deep lesson. So I saw you post something about this Rav Gottlieb and it blew my mind. I think this is a recent post where you mentioned his background. And the reason I'm bringing it up, you guys, is because I always felt in my childhood, growing up in the more religious world, that everyone sort of had a really nice time with things. And I was kind of the one on the outside who had, thank God, no abuse, but divorce and court cases and all this tumultuous sort of life. And I wasn't sure where sort of fit into this religious world. And when I see a rabbi with his past thriving and teaching through those cracks, I find it to be really extra inspiring.
I agree.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your rabbi's background?
Yes. So his mother speaks Ladino. I think she is
Mm,
of a Turkish background. So he's actually half Sephardi, but by Masorah, because his father is Hungarian, had a Hasidic background himself. His father uh, was saved from the Shoah, and
wow.
he was able to escape, but still dealt with some excessive trauma I can imagine, as I believe a large amount of the family otherwise was left in the inferno.
Hmm.
So my Rebbe recollects that it was a home where he often had to literally dodge forks and knives being thrown, let alone boxing matches that would suddenly come up from his father. And so he said he literally, to save his own life, ran from home at 9 years old.
Wow.
And he was semi-homeless, meaning there's large periods where he would literally sleep on benches and
Hmm.
steal food to get by and steal books to entertain himself and just be on the streets.
Yeah.
And then there was times where he indeed was able to sneak into a Beit Midrash and at least sleep there. Or he lived with his grandparents for 10 months during this 4 year period from 9 to 13. And within those 10 months, they both passed away. And all of a sudden, the house is being repossessed, and then he's back on the streets. So when he hits 13, he goes back to the same shul that he grew up in,
Hmm.
which is actually also an Ashlag shul. Rabbi Shlomo ben Yamin Ashlag, who was a younger son of Baal Hasulam, who
Yeah.
was the first Admor of Ashlag. So he was the Rebbe there, and he came to him seeking a consultation. I just want to share this little piece of the story because it's so amazing to see the humanity of my Rebbe, who I think is very much in contrast to the stereotypical Banshak, like the Ben of Shel Kadosh, the son of the holy ones who they're born and they already are circumcised and their face is shining with light and everything is perfect and amazing, and this is far from. So he goes there, and this Rabbi Ashla comes to him and asks him, "Are you here to speak with me?"
Hmm.
And my Rebbe says, the first thing that came to my mind was, that's the last thing I want to do. And he said he wanted to spit in his face and kick him to the other side of the world. But instead of that, the words that came out of his mouth was, yes. So he brings him into his office, and my Rebbe spills the beans. He said, I've been on the streets practically for the past 4 years. I don't know what this Hashem is. I don't know what this Yiddishkeit is. I don't know what life is. Why? Why me? Why this? What kind of loving God is this?
Hmm.
And he said, I totally hear. I would recommend just consider reading this book. I think it'll answer all of your questions. He recommended him the Introduction to the Zohar by Baal Hasulam, and he took the advice. He said he read the first page, and he said just from the first page, he had a deep, like transcendental experience. He said his
Wow.
whole body was filled with light. It's as if he got the download in a single shot of lightning,
Hmm.
where indeed his questions to life were answered. And he had this deep yearning to commit himself to this path and to serve Hashem and to serve Klal Yisrael for the rest of his life. And literally from that moment on, he's in the Beis Midrash every day and he became who he became. Wow, amazing story.
What it is amazing because it goes to show you like Hashem has a time frame for all of us. And if you're meant to have that zap of clarity, you will. And if you're meant to go through your whole life sort of in the shadows, trying to gain inspiration, you've also climbed that ladder, and we should never sort of give up hope because so many of us will not be zocha to flashes of lightning, at least not on its own. I wonder what you would tell just us regular folk out there who, the Zohar seems quite distant from us. And even though I've had the real zchut of learning so much of it, like third hand or fourth hand, and I see how it's life-changing. What about people who are just, not cut from that cloth? Is there anything we can do to have like an access or maybe a shortcut into some of that light?
I appreciate the question and notion of shortcut.
Yeah.
My Rebbe likes to often say there's no
Mm,
shortcuts. And so our community recommends starting with the introductions and the
yeah.
introduction to the introductions. Baal Hasulam particularly wrote many, many introductions.
Hmm. Hmm.
He said is, level 0, 0.1, 0.2,
Yeah.
0.3. Slowly but surely, one will be able to unlock the Zohar, because he himself said, meaning Baal Hasulam said, the
Hmm.
Zohar is sealed with 1,000 seals. And so he did his best to provide people a ladder,
Yeah.
hence he's Baal Hasulam,
Hmm.
so that people can also take a peek and maybe get a taste here and there. So the book I mentioned that
Yeah.
Rabbi Ashlag recommended is a great start. Also a great English translation, Giving, the Essential Teachings of the Kabbalah, as translated by Aryeh Siegel, PhD. These are essays of also Rav Ashlag, based on the compilation of Matan Torah.
Mm.
They're introductory hashkafic pieces of seeing Judaism through the lens of Kabbalah.
Wow. Oh, that's a great idea, guys. We're going to hopefully link that so everyone can sort of access that if they'd like. I always wondered about learning Kabbalah, almost like when we were in high school, we went to like a Beis Yaakov high school that the budget was quite low. And when we would learn chemistry, it would all be on paper and equations and math. And I always felt like this chemistry class is meant to have, beakers and potions and experiments and tables. And I always wonder when I'm learning Kabbalah or Chassidut, is it more experiential than sitting at a desk learning text, in your opinion?
I think with any theory,
Mm,
it takes time until it becomes experiential. There's a building of foundations, there's an integration of formulas, there's actually getting into the science and the technicalities
mhm,
in
mhm,
order that someone can now pour this into that and see what type of chemical reaction comes of
mm.
it, so to speak.
So it really is the long game. Okay, so we're gonna learn and then we're gonna intellectualize it to get to the point where maybe it could run through us. I think that makes sense, and there's no real time frame. Just, the results are not dependent on us, are they? So I think that's actually very hopeful. Okay. So I know that you are some sort of really Kabbalah bent life coach. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're sharing the wisdom that you've learned to help better people's lives. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So what do you tell people when they come to you with all sorts of, there are blockages that come from apathy and trauma? Is there, I know it's not a packaged answer, but what is sort of the journey you would take them on?
Absolutely. First and foremost is a clarification process.
Hmm.
In that, when it comes to the tree of life, the Sefirot, each Sefira has a particular area of our life that it's connected to, as far as what I've learned. And so go through the gamut of the tree of life one by one, with even the subcategories of each area. Like, what is a chesed? What is loving kindness? And how does it relate to your spiritual and personal development and your creativity and your sense of calm? And to break down in a, albeit, at least in this methodology, a CBT-like approach,
Hmm.
where we gauge the mental, emotional, behavioral faculties within each of those categories and just see how a person is interacting with that area in their life.
Wow.
And it's very easy to see with this simple breakdown of where the misalignments are.
Hmm.
And therefore, like any life coach, make some standard incremental shifts while I
Hmm.
hold them accountable to step into that newer life
Yeah.
of alignment and understanding. It's often from that clarification process that we have a greater clarity as to what actually is the biggest pain point or opportunity for alignment. And that if we felt like we got this into alignment, everything else would fall into place as well, at least in a greater ease.
Yeah.
Whatever people's goals are, I challenge them is actually just a means to a much deeper goal. And even that is often a means to the deepest of goal, which just coming to connecting to our essence in order to be in full expression, which by definition is connecting us and bring us to Dvekus with Hashem.
Wow, that is some powerful stuff. That's amazing. Do you think you're fulfilling your life's purpose by the work that you do every day? And is there a way to know?
It's a great question. I very much feel like I am being in my purpose and being expressed.
Hmm.
And there's still other parts of me that are still cooking up that need to be expressed as well.
Yes.
So I know it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
I, for example, stepped into a meditation, a very simple one, where I stepped into a yeshuva dot. I settled my mind and I simply asked my neshama, I asked Hashem in that moment, what is the purpose of my life? And before I can even finish the question in my mind's eye, I got the download. And very simply put, to help people.
Mhm.
And as simple and vague as it was deeply resonant to the point that it inspired tears. So I know that is the way. It just so happens that it's going to be through a myriad of formats, whether it's inspirational nuggets of wisdom on Instagram, or it's through coaching, or it's through hip hop, which I
Wait.
look forward to expressing that as well.
Wait, hold on. Hip hop. Wait, to clarify and not to put anyone into any boxes, but because we're all Bali Tshuva, but because maybe you're in the classic sense of the word, you have been in many different worlds before. The hip hop, I think that there are so many kids out there who that music would be it, and it doesn't have to be that deep. I think that's amazing. And I don't know that that exists to that extent. That's really cool.
Yeah, I also don't think so. I think it's a huge opportunity for sure.
Well, what I want to know something, and I think I've asked this question so many times in so many different ways, but years ago, I went for yoga certification and I got really into Buddhist meditation and then explored my own culture in meditation. And I wonder, how is our mystical practice or our mystic beliefs different than the other ones that exist for the people on this planet? I always think because I was born a Jew, I'm going to go through the Jewish path. But are there real market differences?
I can just speak from my experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Years of transcendental meditation and yoga, I never came across an immediate and directed intention setting or active process in those experiences that invited Hashem directly into the experience. It was often one of me and myself, me and the void. Perhaps Hashem was found there and experienced on different occasions, but for us to actually create that target point in our ratzon, in our desire, and actively draw his light and a commitment and a rotz v'shov, a running and returning between his light and an expansion of the vessel,
Mm.
that I find to be utterly unique in
Yeah.
our Masorah.
That's actually very much resonates with me to the point where, guys, if you learn some techniques, like I do this meditation that's completely void of any religion. It's kind of neuroscientific meditation. But because I have some tools about the Shem HaMeforash or some ideas about light, I get to sort of custom make it my way. And it definitely is its own experience. And it's hard to put these things into words. Do you feel like when the days that you do get to meditate, and is that daily, are your maasim, are your actions different because of it?
It is daily, and
Hmm.
it's absolutely different because I'm human, and there are times where I don't get to it, and my tefillah is not so much there. And in the busy day that I have, don't get to crunch it in nor prioritize it even before sleep.
Yeah.
And it's just a night and day difference. I
Mm.
truly believe that if we begin our day in the light to the best of our ability, whether that is learning or it is meditating and prayer or putting it all into a jumbled experience and that all the above can be experienced in a meditative way,
Mhm.
we are going to be set up for success.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think it ends up becoming less of a struggle of the fight, between these Yetzer Hara and your better self. And hopefully with more ease once you sort of experience the peace that comes with doing the right thing. And I'm not saying that because I'm there. I'm saying that because I fail and disappoint myself so much to that extent. I know that I hope that Hashem is more forgiving of me than we are forgiving of ourselves. And I really do believe that. And so to sort of learn to feel that love, I think is it repairs a lot of baggage and all the other stuff we bring into life. Do you ever do this sort of practice with your clients?
Absolutely.
Ooh,
After the initial clarification process that I mentioned, it's often the case that the large majority of the rest of the programming, just energetically, is integrating these meditative tools and often me guiding them into these deep experiential places that equates to breakthroughs, clearing of traumas. I've helped people 5-year, 25-year intense traumas that, we built into that space to eventually get into, to flood that memory with light, to extract the spark, the nitzots from within the klipa. I think this is the most transformational methodology in my great bias here. But to see it firsthand with those who have, similar to me, been through the gamut of other methods and are coming to their own backyard, to see the accuracy and the consistency and how rapid it could be, is intensely inspirational for myself and for them to see
yeah.
how much they can continue in that path.
I'm so thankful for the generation we live in, besides for the fact that my ancestors were also in the Holocaust, et cetera. But just speaking about the thirst that exists out there. And I know everything has its darker side. So with that thirst and access comes a bunch of other things. And we're obviously strong enough that we got to be born in this time. And I just feel that we're fortunate. And I'm hoping that we're just waiting for bigger things and a spreading of this light. And I think that's what you're doing in your way. That's kind of what I'm doing in my own tiny, small way, is trying to have everyone who's listening to us realize that it's not far from you. It's lo rechokahi. It's all the answers sort of exist in us through inspiration, maybe from those that are greater than us. Who else do you look up to? Who are the Rabbanim or Tzaddikim or Tzidkaniyot that resonate with you?
Yeah, so aside from Baal Hasulam, which I would say is like the main
Mm,
river that I drink from, because that's my chassidus.
yeah.
I love Torah's Breslov. I love Rabbi Nachman and Reb Nassan and connect very deeply to their Torah. I'm a huge fan of the Piazetzner Rebbe. I have a beautiful painting in my office here of the Piazetzner.
Wait, can you show it to
Uh,
us real quick for those watching on YouTube?
let's see if I can
Okay.
get it over there. I can't see on my end, but
We got it. We got it. Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful.
yes,
I love a demus. I love seeing a face that sort of just reminds you, like, don't say that, it just sort of like keeps you humble and in line. That's fantastic. Okay.
yes. The son, and at least in our Hasidic dynasty, the successor to Baal Hasulam, which is my Rebbe's Rebbe, Rebbe Baruch Shalom Ashlag, blessed memory. I would say these are the main pillars. I have absolutely loved to dive into the Tanya.
Yeah.
I the CBT methodology that I'm trained in is through a Chabad system. So
Wow.
I get exposed to a lot of Maimarim and wisdom from that path, and it's beautiful. I'd say the Baal Shem Tov
Yes.
in a general sense.
Be a given by now. Yes, for sure.
Yes, given those come to mind. And I think as a pillar, as an example, the name of who started the Beis Yaakov movement is slipping.
Oh, Rebbitzin. No, I'm a Bisiaco girl. We should know this. Don't worry, ChatGPT.
But Sarah Schneer.
Sarah Schneer. Yes, we were actually in Krakow. It's interesting because the Beis Yaakov movement of yesteryear is the essence still lives on, but it's actually quite different than the practicing Beis Yaakov of today, which I'm sure much of Europe is. It's so interesting how society does change and how a traumatized society rebuilds afterwards. And so the idea that Hasidut is accessible to people like me, it's just wonderful. It's so above my pay grade, and yet I can sort of bridge it and understand again on a layman's version of how to access this light. Can you walk us through like your typical day? You can give us the abridged version, but maybe one of us or some of us can hear something that inspires us to incorporate it into our lifestyle.
Sure. So typical day, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mm,
So this is like my good ideal day, right?
mm-hmm.
So 3 o'clock in the morning, freshening up, some cold water on the face, a little bit of movement, kind of get my energy going in order that I don't fall asleep when I do try to sit in and settle myself into. Once I'm saying my brachas, then a meditation, and some connecting immediately into the text just to get into that light prior to the pre-dawn,
Mm-hmm.
which currently in Israel is around something like 4:15 a.m. Depending on the weather, I'll go to the mikvah prior to the deeper learning session with my Rebbe.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do a cold dip just to wake myself up and kind of be Yotzi the whole cold plunge
The ice plunge.
culture.
Yep.
Yeah. And so we'll try to be in the base midrash by latest 4:15, 4:30.
Mm.
We are learning Zohar, the parish of the Sulam, and then we're learning the Talmud Esrei Sfirot, which is the other magnum opus of Baal Hasulam. It's his master commentary on the Kitvei Ari, literally the Eitz Chaim. There's perush on perush for every section, and every chapter has a literal list of definitions. 100 plus words. What is light? What is vessel? What is this? What is that? He said, after I've come, no one should be worried that they can connect to the wisdom. There's no place to fall anymore, and that he's clarified all the questions, so to speak. So we do that until 6, daven until 7. I have a chavrusa every day from 7 to 8. And then I do my best to continue my learning Seder from 8 until 10 with a myriad, Talmud,
Is there
Mishnayos,
coffee
Halacha.
somewhere in this
Absolutely
Okay.
coffee. I try to hold on to Dr. Huberman's recommendation of waiting at least 90 minutes
Mm-hmm.
to have the first cup. So that'll be my first cup. There's often a second cup before I step into my kind of work day around
Okay, he's
3
human,
p.m.
ladies and gentlemen. Okay, good. Good to know.
Absolutely human. Uh, 10 to 11 or so is another cheer for my Rebbe in the morning. And then I start kind of semi getting into work mode, aside from having my breakfast, which is pretty consistent, pas b'shacharis. Uh, have my tikkun klali usually around that time as well. And aside from tikkun klali and a little bit of learning, let's say during the meal,
Mm-hmm.
I will check up some emails, respond to some DMs, do some kind of simple transition work. Uh, Mincha's 1:30. I'll usually learn a little bit before and after. From 2 to 3 is a dedicated family time because my kid is home from gone. I have a little one who's 3.5 and a newborn who's 4.5 months.
Oh, Mazel Tov.
Thank you. So usually playing with him until 3, which is when I start getting into my coaching calls for the day.
Mm.
That's 3 to 7. And then I will just kind of plug out as best as I can and go family. Kids are asleep, they're not. We try to put them to bed, try to catch an early mark if I can, dinner, and then spending time with my wife and being with the family as best as I can, and still hopefully going to sleep at a good time.
Yeah, what's a good
I'll
time if
just,
you're up that
I'll just,
early?
the best possible time, which is rare these days, is 9.
Mm.
Otherwise, by 10, 10:30. If I'm lacking in sleep for the night, let's say if it's like a 4.5, 5 hour night,
Mm-hmm.
then I will absolutely get a good nap in the late morning.
Wow. Well, not to make light of it, but what do you do when there are missiles in the middle of the night? Like last night, you guys, we had a missile. A lot of us didn't fall back asleep after, that's a disturbance. And sleep is still important. No matter where we're learning or how we're learning, we need to take care of our bodies.
True. My wife and I were a bit disturbed that no one woke up.
Oh.
We heard that there was, and we're like, wow, we were pretty deep in it. So
I
we
sometimes
usually do
wish
wake
that would
up.
happen. Yep. I hear. I hear.
Yes.
It's not a simple thing, that's for sure. I think that that's a day that a few of us could probably achieve, especially us as women. And I think it's so inspirational to know that there are people who are doing this. I remember reading this book called Souls on Fire by Elie Wiesel, and he discussed before the Holocaust, they would get together and have these Kabbalah groups from like 3 to 5 in the morning to do these tikkunim. And when I was younger, I used to be like, oh my gosh, is there anyone doing this now? And it just makes me so happy to hear that there are some holy Jews in Yerushalayim or wherever they are doing the avodah so all of us can sleep and bring this better world. That's fantastic.
Yes.
I wanted to know if you had any Shavuos or Shavuot insights or something we could tap into for those learning all night and for those going to sleep who can learn for an hour or learn for 20 minutes. Is there anything specific you would say to connect us to the day?
Interestingly, in my community, we don't actually do any of the tikkunim, let's say of the Arizal and the like. We have a particular Masorah. There's a specific mimer from the Zohar that we read.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of the Kala in the night. It's talking about the Kala being the Shechina and the dynamic of her connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the story of Shavuos. It's quite a long mimer. If someone was up all night, they'd probably finish it just barely, saying from experience.
Yeah.
So if one can feels resonant with trying to tap into a little bit of Zohar, could be nice to find that. It's in the Hakdama of the Zohar, meaning like the very first section, not the introduction to the Zohar, the introduction of the Zohar. The Zohar doesn't start with Bereshit, it starts with the introduction. And so it's kind of in the middle of the introductions. But otherwise, just in terms of intention, I would like to share a little concept on the day, if I may.
Please.
And the notion of Matan Torah. It's a very sobering piece of wisdom in that Har Sinai, says Baal Hasulam, Har, mountain, is from the language of Hirhurim. Hirhurim are reflections, but often has a negative connotation. They're like the machinations of the mind, or negative thinking processes. And Sinai, he connects phonetically to Sina, hate.
Ooh.
So Har Sinai can translate to thoughts of hatred.
Wow.
It says specifically in the place of thoughts of hatred, can someone receive the Torah? What does that mean? Someone who's wrestling, someone who's in the battle, someone who's in the war, someone who knows what it's like to try to climb up the mountain, so to speak, and try to refine themselves and be a bit more compassionate, be a bit more giving, mitaken those midos. Often in that process, thoughts of hatred come up in the sense of, why am I here? Who is this God? Why am I bothering? All the more so when someone's really closening themselves to Kedusha, closing themselves to some type of transformation, all the more so as Zeh, Gore Lezeh, Zeh Lomat Lezeh, that the Yetzer Hara grows with the Yetzer Tov. And so when Hashem went to the nations and offered them the Torah, they didn't want it. And he paints the dynamic within our inner consciousness. So the nations are the aspect within us. They're aspects of our desire to receive for ourselves alone, aspects of our egoism. So the egoism within hates the Torah and doesn't want to receive it. Because if we receive the Torah, those aspects would be transmuted. They would cease to exist as we know it. And so they don't want to die, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so they say, no, not for me. But Yisrael stands for Yashar El, aligned with Hashem, aligned in thought, speech, and action to be in the mode of giving, to be in the mode of altruism. And so for us to be sober and appreciate that it is indeed in the struggle that we're able to receive the Torah, which is from the language of Or and Hora'ah, says the Zohar, light and guidance. It's not just a book that we read. It is the light of guiding consciousness. If one is washing dishes for their spouse, I would argue, as would my Rebbe, that is more Torah than the Torah, because the Torah is a means to transformation.
Yes.
We want to be in the action. We want to do the giving. The Torah helps draw the lights upon us so that we can step into that avoda, B'ezrat Hashem.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's hopeful for all of us who are struggling, learning whatever it is. You could learn Shmiras Halashon and then speak Lashon Hara 10 minutes later and just, what is this for? What am I doing this for? And it does spark
Yeah.
up those, resentment feelings. When you say Or Torah, for me, it re-inspires me to remember that this is not a ball and chain. This is the biggest gift that humanity could ask for, and you were chosen to be in a Jewish body in this generation right now. Tell me about what you believe Gilgulim or reincarnation might mean. And I want to get a little specific. From what you know, are you always in a Jewish Gilgul?
Mm. Gilgul has the numerical value of chesed. So first and
Mm,
foremost, just to have the framework that if we were back to finish the job or put in a further dent into the tikkun that is necessary, it is from a place of love. It's not a place of, a chain and a ball, as you just put.
yeah.
It's an opportunity to connect ever deeper, an opportunity to expand the vessel so that when we come to the position of the highest consciousness beyond the body as we know it, there'll be that much sweeter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do take a practical interpretation to Gilgulim as well, as Baal Hasulam was an incredibly practical person that brought everything down into the avoda right here, right now. We have a Gilgul every second because we're a different person every second.
Ooh.
Whatever state of consciousness you're in, that is your current Gilgul. So much so, he brought a proof. The word chazir,
Mm-hmm.
pig, a swine, is in the
Mm-hmm.
language of chazara, choser.
Mm-hmm.
When someone regresses and returns to the quote unquote filth, meaning that which they have already deemed to not serve them or the collective in this process of redemption that we're all in together, then in that moment, they are reincarnated as a pig. This
Mm-hmm.
is a concept brought in the Zohar. So one can take it literally and think, oh boy, I'm going to come back as a swine. No, but in a relative sense, if you've regressed after already affirming to yourself and doing the tshuva that this is not for me, then in that moment, you've regressed to that state, so to speak. Can you rise up the moment after? Absolutely.
Wow.
Never too late. You had a second part to your question as far as Gilgulim and
Yes.
being of different nations. Yeah, I mean that's certainly possible, and I think Shar HaGilgulim, the actual gates of reincarnations in the Aryeh
Mm-hmm.
paints many pictures of great Gedolim through ancient times that were indeed reincarnations of other nations prior and who went through particular processes and eventually got to that point
Yeah.
of elevation.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. So I have one question that I usually end, even though the time is flying, but that means we're into something right now. And I always treat good conversations as its own meditation. When you're not wondering, what am I going to eat later? When you're really focused on something, or if you guys are driving or wherever you are, if you're listening intently, it's a version of that sort of presence and being in the right now. I ask this question to people who are affiliated and not so, and I'm always curious of the answer, and it always blows me away. But I'm going to ask you to paint a picture of what you imagine as Rabbi Adam Yitzchak, what a redeemed or enlightened world looks like or feels like to you and to us.
It looks like an altruistic society
Mm,
that is rooted and anchored in the wisdom of the Torah and the mitzvot in a way of the deepest intention, meaning the sweetness of intentionality within every detail. So much so that one does not have to think about themselves or worry about oneself because you know you have 99 friends who are actively concerned for your needs. And so if you have a society, utopian ideal, a redemptive one, as I just described, as really Baal Hasulam writes about plenty, actually writes plenty about the perfected society in the future time. There's many Maimarim, social articles, we call it. And so he describes it as such, a type of kibbutz-like philosopher king, so to speak, lahavdil, really a tzaddik-based society that has such a system where we no longer have to be concerned for the self and therefore be ensconced in the ego. Rather, we can absolutely care and fulfill our mission in being in service. Because he describes that the 613 mitzvot, as the Zohar describes, are 613 18, which means eitzot, advices, and 613 pikudin, which is pikudot, meaning deposits. This is not a ball and chain. These are pieces of advice on how to exit oneself. because whether or not it's between man and man or man and God, it is a regulatory system that allows us to slowly but surely, one step at a time, step outside of ourselves to serve the other. It's regulating altruism. It's regulating our divinity and potential. And once we've regulated, and it's become our second nature to be giving, first and foremost, as opposed to receiving for ourselves, then we can actually taste the deposits, meaning every single detail of the Torah and the mitzvot, every letter, let alone every detail of the halacha, will be gleaming with flavor, the same way that when you taste this fruit or that fruit, you can taste the differences. So too, Shabbat will have a particular flavor, and Shmirat Lashon will have a particular flavor. It will be revealed to us. So not only will there be a beautiful collective society where we are all truly caring and serving each other, there's also going to be in tandem a great revelation of the sweetness, an explicit way of the Torah that's been given to us.
Wow. It just goes to show you how, the original person who thought of a co-op society, whether it was kibbutz life or the first communist, I could understand how it went awry based on ego, but how the dream might have been pure and how one day all of humanity is thirsty for the same thing. And it's another way to unify all of us. I think that's beautiful. Rev Adam Yitzchak, thank you so much for your light, your Torah, and your time for coming on here and sharing so much with us and the world.
My honor and pleasure. Thank you for having me, really.
All right, guys, thanks for listening.